All right, Bev, we are recording this time. I managed to hit the right button, so we are good to go this time
Fabulous.
around.
So nice to be here again with you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you being on again, and uh, excited to see what today brings.
Me too. So what brings you here now?
Well, it's just kind of a follow up from last week. Last week I kind of touched on past regrets or regrets of not fulfilling certain um, goals or ambitions in my life, and I've done actually this week. I've let it surface, and I let it bubble up, and pardon me, and it's I do feel really good this week about it. I've kind of let some of that go. Obviously, I can't control the past. It's already done and happened. So I'm really just focused on the future, and that's really where I want to make sure that my focus and my mindset is all looking towards what could be rather than what wasn't, if that makes sense. So I feel really good this week, and I just really kind of want to build on that and keep the momentum going to make sure that I'm staying focused on the future and not worried about what I can't control in the past, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's just the mind, body, and spirit connection for me. This week is going to be an important thing to really focus on, getting myself healthy, both physically and emotionally, and even spiritually in some aspects. I believe I know what I need to do and how to go about it. But I guess this just maybe meeting with you provides a little level of accountability to make sure that I am doing the things that I need to do to keep moving forward towards where I want to be here in the future.
Beautiful. That's a beautiful point you make. That we co-create together. We don't live in caves alone. We are able to become who we're supposed to become when we have a sense of belonging and resting and togetherness. So that's really beautiful, that insight.
Yeah. So it's with the podcast, this is this podcast is really or the podcast that this isn't part of it, but the Conquering Everest podcast has really started to blossom and take its own shape and identity. And so really focusing in on that and finding the guests and the because I really do feel like everybody's story has something to share. Funny thing is, every time I have somebody on, I can resonate with them in different levels, and even though our lives didn't follow the exact same path, there's a lot of ways that I can resonate with them. And I just, I don't know. I just really want to build, take the blocks, the building blocks from, I don't want to recreate the wheel. And that's, because I know others have gone out before me and they've blazed their paths, and, and so I'm really trying to focus on not recreating the wheel, but rather maybe modifying it and shaping it more for my life and my
very
ambitions.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
because there's so many wisdoms that we get. It's nice not to just throw everything out, but to choose, as you say, what fits me, what doesn't. And I love the fact that you spoke about that the people that you're meeting on your podcast, there's a uniqueness to everyone, but there's a universal thread.
Right.
Through the tapestry of our lives that we can identify with each other.
Yeah, because I really truly believe there's no like coincidences or accidents. I think we all connect. There's a reason. As I've spent this past week really kind of thinking about letting the past bubble up and say what it needed to say, like let it talk to me, let it speak to me. And when I went through, it wasn't too very long, when I was going through pretty deep depression, which I believe was manifested itself in me because I held on to that past for so long and I wouldn't let it go, and I kept revisiting it. And so I think that depression manifested itself, and I lost a good 2 years of my life, even though I was still active in some ways. I probably wasn't operating at any more than 50% capacity during the depression. But really just kind of letting the past speak and seeing what that means for the future. Like I said, I don't believe there's any accidents. It happened for a reason. The Conquering Everest podcast was created out of that depressed state, and my desire to find a friendly voice that would reassure me, tell me it's okay, help me understand that I wasn't going through this alone, that others, are going through it and have gone through it. And it's when you
beautiful.
When you get
for
quiet,
others also, that is, we don't have to go through anything alone.
Right. And when you kind of quiet yourself and you let those regrets of the past, I mean, that's what I'm going to refer to them to. When you let them bubble up and say their piece, I found it's very easy to let that go. It's like, okay, I've let you come forward. I've let you say your piece. Now you need to go exist in the past, because I'm going to focus. I'm going to move forward for the future and build my future, since I can't go back and rebuild my past. And so it has brought a lot of, I guess I'll say, insight. And it's, as the week has progressed, the past has spoken less and less. It hasn't become lodged into my thinking as much as it probably has in the past. So meditation's been pretty important this week for me, to let that speak, and to also just kind of get myself present in the moment, so that I could totally focus on the future alone. Yeah, bless you.
Yeah. I love that. That you've given it space. You've given the feelings space. You've allowed them.
Yeah.
And then you can investigate them and let them go, and then nurture the other parts of yourself that you really want to be focusing on as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I would say it's definitely been a weight removed, from my shoulders. And I do feel like I can move forward at a faster pace now. Like I could grow more in different ways than maybe I was allowing myself previously to really letting, because I did. I mean, anytime that past would try to bubble up, I would kind of just, it would knock me back a little bit, and I'd have to spend some time with it. But the time was more focused on what wasn't, rather than what now could be. And I'm trying to find my rhythm with the meditation, playing around.
I love that. If we can just pause there a minute with what can be. What has the gift been from those regrets to the now?
Mm-hmm.
When you sit with that, what can be now? What's possible? What is possible now for you?
Anything. I think anything's possible if I'm willing to get out of my own way and let it create. Definitely throwing the wants and the desires out to the universe, letting them be known. This is where I want to go. I mean, my main objective is not money. It's not fame, popularity. I really just, I feel like my purpose in life, for as long as I'm still here, is really just to provide service to others. And I feel, like I'm doing with the podcast, like I'm doing with interviews or coaching sessions, to really just keep building on the building blocks. I think the sky's the limit. The key is going to be I feel like it is to get out of my own way and just
Well, what does that mean? Get out of your own way.
I think, fears, insecurities, even though I've come a long way in my life. I don't consider myself a fearful person. If anything scares me.
And you name some of those fears and insecurities?
I think
slow down a bit.
Yeah. Well, I think, one thing that I'm my own worst critic. So anytime that I'm having a conversation that, for the podcast, as I go through it, even though I get good feedback from people like, hey, that was a great episode, thumbs up and all that good stuff. I'm kind of somewhere in the back of my mind, I still find myself critiquing like myself on the recordings. And it's like, are you asking the right questions? Are you being too stiff and rigid? Just things like, and it's not so much a fear. Maybe it's an insecurity.
And almost, I feel like you're kind of here and you're not here. The person's there. Sometimes you're there, but then also yourself comes in, and then there's a self-critical voice that, am I doing this right? Which takes away from us being with the other person, because you might suddenly, the other person might become a parent figure who is critical, or a teacher.
Right.
And it's always nice to be able to come back to presence and see, oh, I'm not sitting with my mom now, I'm sitting with Brian.
Yeah, I think there definitely was, and that may be part of the past. There's some criticality growing up. It wasn't necessarily in what I was doing or wasn't doing. I think it was just more around the environment I grew up in, where, as being an overweight kid, there was people that were always commenting on weight, or trying to think way back when, but there always seems to be little things people would pick at. And as I've gotten older, I know I'm definitely a people pleaser. I want people to be happy around me.
So none of the adult voices you were hearing were, you're not good enough, you're too overweight, you're too this, you're too that. So that's kind of, you've adopted that as your internal voice. You see, they were right.
Yeah.
They must have been right.
And it's strange to still have that voice, because I've done so much, even just in the last 6 years. I've overcome so many fears, and, I've gotten up and I've given, I've presented and talked to audiences, over 100 people. And I felt, of course, while I'm doing it, there's a part of the cycle in my mind that's gets critical. Not maybe not so much while I'm on stage or anything like that, but once I get off, I sit down. It's funny because somebody asked me, how'd you feel that when it's like, it could have been better. It could have been better. But it could have been,
it's never good enough.
Yeah.
And that never good enough seems to come at the expense of connection. Like if I'm always on in my head, I'm checking myself, then I can't really be with you. And that's what relationship is. It's not something out there. It's a moment-to-moment update of information that we're streaming to each other. But I can only, if I'm with you now and not thinking about everything else, then I can actually be with you and hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's I think that's the one aspect that I'm missing, especially when conducting or having conversations. I don't even like to call them interviews for the podcast. I like to call them conversations. But if I'm sitting there and constantly critiquing myself as I'm doing it, like you said, I can't really be comfortable and present in the moment. There's always this little bit of a tension, and so I need to. I know I've identified that as something that's potentially holding me back, or at least something that it's something that I know I need to conquer, and I need to get. And I'm getting better at it.
What does it look like to not have that? If you didn't have that self-critical voice, what would your life look like?
I can say as I go back and I watch or I listen to previous episodes of the podcast, I feel like the first 15, 20 minutes, I'm kind of tight. I'm not loose. And that's usually when the voices, not the voice, the little critical side of me is like, okay, is everything okay? Is the transition smooth? I'm kind of gauging everything until I finally get to a point where maybe something is said or we get into a conversation that goes away, because now something has pulled me to the front and I'm here. And as I've watched some of those, I can see like the first half of the conversation, I'm pretty tight. But then by, halfway through, I'm loosening up. And then by the end, I'm just feel like I'm sitting down with an old friend. And that to me is what that ultimately, that's what I want it to look like. I want to be able to have interactions with people just be like an old friend, whether I've known them for 1 minute or 100 years,
Right. It sounds, if I may offer, to me, it sounds like that there's this question and checking initially. Is everything okay? And then when you feel safe, there can be a flow.
Yeah.
And you can be fully present and immersed and engaged in the relationship, so to speak. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, because it's not really driven by fear. I mean, I guess there is an element of fear in there, right? The fear of failure, I think, is what's most present. But it feels different. It doesn't feel like it used to feel. Like when I was a kid, or, let's say when I got into my 20s and 30s, I had a lot of reservations and fears. Like what I do today with the podcast, with coaching, with writing, any of that, speaking, go back to my 20s and my 30s, I would have never imagined that I'd be doing what I'm doing today, because I was so impacted by insecurities from my past, emotional trauma that occurred at a young age, and it was truly a fear. I was afraid. I was fearful of being vulnerable. I was fearful of standing up and speaking in front of people, fear of rejection. But now it's because that's really been my mission in my life for the last 6 years, is to, if it scares me, I'm going to face it. I'm going to go head up with it and prove that it doesn't have any power over me. So even though I realize like that self-critical voice is probably fear-based, the fear of failure, it doesn't feel the same. It's I don't even know how to explain it. It's just like a different kind of feeling. I don't feel afraid of it.
What does failure look like to you?
I think failure to me would be this sounds, as I think of it in my head, I think this may open up a Pandora's box, but is really, I think my fear is letting down those I'm trying to help. It doesn't matter what happens to me. you know, I know deep down inside that, I mean, I've been, I mean, my life's been a roller coaster of, you know, of peaks and valleys. I mean, I've been on top of the mountain and I've been living on the streets, you know. So I feel like for myself, no matter what happens, I can overcome and I can get back to a place that I want to be. But I think for what I really don't want to mess up is what I'm putting out there for others. Excuse me,
We
whether
can
I'm
just pause there a minute, Brian. That sounds to me like that's coming from a very, very familiar place that I can manage, but who am I letting down? That's very, it seems that this isn't new to you. This is a familiar question, if you like, that walks with you, or a fear, if you like. It sounds like that's not a new thing. Does that resonate?
Yeah, and I think, and I do recognize it because it's, I mean, all my life, the choices, at least for up, you know, up until the last 6 years, most of the choices I've made have been for others. Everything from my work to, um, you know, saving money, investing, things like that. I've always done things to please someone else or to make them happy, to make their life comfortable. Even going back as far as marriage, you know, when I got married, which I'm now divorced, but when I first got married, I got married not because I wanted to get married. I got married because I felt like if I didn't marry my girlfriend, then I was going to let her down. That she would be disappointed. Um,
What happens to
so
you when you feel that you're in that role of, it's not about me, my needs come second, to the point where I might make even an intimate decision that I feel isn't right for me, but it must be right for the other person.
right.
It almost seems bizarre, doesn't it? That it's not right for me, but I'm going to make this union, and it will be right then.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's how it's up until the last 6 years or so when I finally decided to focus really on me and what I needed. But even focusing on me and I'm still I'm still really concerned about, you know, making sure that others, those around me, those that what I say or do, it impacts their life. I want to make sure it impacts it in a positive way, and that's where I think that criticality comes from.
If we can just pause there a minute also, please.
Yeah.
And I'm going like this just to kind of like we're looking at a high resolution, that I'm afraid that my decisions will impact people negatively. In other words, and this sounds pretty heavy to me, that I don't only have to worry about myself, but I have to worry about others as well and their reactions. So that would make that's a sense, what I'm getting a sense of, there's a little bit of contraction here. I have to be really cautious here, what I say, what I do, because it might impact them negatively. So it's not that the other person has the choice whether this is negative or positive. I'm already decided. My deeds will be the positive or negative. Does that sound kind of how it is? And that sounds like a weight. That sounds like a responsibility.
Yeah, it does. It feels like it is a weight. It feels like parenting over and over again, even though it may not be my kids. You know, it's and when I say kids, I mean I'm referring to people, anybody that my life intersects with. It's like instantly it becomes, you know, what can I do for them, which I like. I hope that never changes.
But then it comes with that extra question that will be positive.
Yeah.
You know,
Will I say the right things? Will I, you know, am I doing the right things? Am I, you know, guiding them in the right direction? The funny thing with this is
it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah. But as I've done some coaching and mentoring on, you know, where I was the coach or the mentor, it's funny because those fears don't exist in those when I sit down with somebody and they're asking me for my advice or they're asking for guidance. I never second guess a thing I say. I feel like, in that moment, and maybe it's the impact of, hey, they have this, like speaking, that's an area where I mentor quite a bit, and people will come to me and they're like, well, here's my idea, here's my thoughts, here's my limitations, and then I'll, I can share my insights and advice, and I feel by the end of that, when they're walking, I guess maybe it's the instant satisfaction that in that moment right then, I know whether or not they're walking away happy, because they'll reinforce that. So when I say, they come to me and they say, here's what I want to talk about, and then we have that conversation, and I say my piece. If, of course, if they're leaving and they're like, shaking, hey, thank you, this was so insightful, I'm getting that instant reward, right? I'm my ego's being fed, and it's saying, hey, you did good. But with the podcast, just for instance, I put out an episode, unless somebody comes, I mean, it's not like I know, did this episode help someone? Did I ask the right questions to pull out the right information so that, people have what they need? And so when I don't get that instant reassurance, I think that's where then the weight does come in, because it's like, well, could I have done better?
And that sounds, that's very familiar to you. That's not new. Just with the podcast, that sounds familiar, that I need instant feedback. And the feedback comes from the outside. They'll tell me if I'm overweight, unhealthy, whatever, unfit.
Right.
It's not something from within. And you began today speaking about how you really want to have an inner gauge, if you like, of what health looks like and spiritual enrichment. But yet there's an outside that'll either make you feel really bad about yourself or really good about yourself. It's as if Brian is lost.
Yeah.
His voice is lost and not heard.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's so. I don't know if I'm afraid of not being heard as much as just, like I said.
I didn't say that Brian is afraid of not being heard.
Oh.
But Brian's voice to himself is not heard. It's the other voices outside that are louder.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that has been something, I mean, throughout my life. There's been, I could probably go back and pick out several instances where there's been times where I've made a choice and I've just been, hey, this is the choice I'm making, and I'm going to let the chips fall where they may. But then there's times where I make a choice and it's like, this might be good for me, but is it good for those around me? Is this going to,
And part of what you're feeling is also universal. You're not the only one who questions your choices and your decisions. The question is, how can you make your voice count more, your inner voice, so that you're not dependent on other people telling you if you're healthy or not, or if your message is clear.
Right.
How can you make your voice louder to yourself?
I think, where I think I just have to believe in myself, not just when the answers can, whether or not, something helped or I helped someone. When it's face to face and, we're sitting down, that's easy to gauge. And so, but when it's remote or it's distant or it's work where, I'm not going to know until I've completed this task, whether or not it's going to be good or bad. I think for me, what I really need to do is have faith that, for the 46 years that I've been walking this planet, I've gained the skills, I've gained the knowledge, I've gained the, confidence to know that I'm, if I'm being authentic, if I'm not trying to, if my purpose in doing something is truly genuine, then it's going to succeed regardless.
What does belief look like to you? Believing in yourself, what does that look like to you?
Well, that's a good question. What does it, I don't know if I can answer that. I think that's a question I don't know if I can answer right now. What does that believe? Because I don't think I've ever really put myself first enough to determine what that is. I'm a very reactive individual. So when, I tend to respond when things happen rather than be proactive and
can we make some distinctions there? Reactive, in my understanding, is when you act and you're not informed by emotion. That is childlike. That's from you reacting, you're seeing in front of you, not the person, but somebody from your past who's triggering you. To respond is the ability to respond when you're informed as a mature person what's going on. That's responsibility, the ability to respond to what's really going on. And then the third thing you said was, and that skipped my mind, you said reactive, respond, I forgot the third thing. But there's that distinction. You said I'm very reactive.
Yeah.
And then I respond. So sometimes that reactive part is a much younger place. And the place that responds is the older place, where you suddenly come back into what's going on here and now.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense. Something happens, I react to it, and then I respond. And when I respond, I have confidence in myself. But if I try to collect my thoughts here. I think there's a proactive side that impacts us all, to where we need to, some people, they can think about where they know exactly where their life's going to go. And they say, hey, in 5 years, this is where I'm going to be. In 10 years, this is where I'm going to be. And they can step that out in their mind or on paper. They could draw a map, if you would, about their present and their future. They can solidify exactly where they want to go. For me, not so much. Like, I can visualize to an extent. I know what I want. I know where I want my finances. I know where I want my career to be. I know where, I want my social and personal life to be, spiritual life. I can see that what I want. What I don't do, though, is I push the ball down the hill, and the boulder down the hill, and then depending on, is it approaching a tree? Okay, let's react. Let's pivot. So instead of just pushing it and having faith that it's going to reach the bottom, I push it, and then I constantly, I'm on high alert for any obstacles that I'm going to need to respond to.
That's quickly. A very beautiful metaphor that you bring, because the pushing a boulder down a hill gives me a sense of not always so much control, which is really life. We aren't always in control, right? We've been privy to that this year.
Right.
And yet, then we do come across obstacles, but not necessarily because we fail to anticipate them. Because we can only see so far, we can't see around the bend. And then when that obstacle appears, then that becomes our path. How do we then navigate that? And that's good to take a pause and then respond. What do I want to do now with that? So it's not necessarily that that you can be in control, or it seems to you possibly that people who have this long-term plan are in control. They might have a very different vision from their lives than you do, and that's fine. What I would encourage you to do is to decide, and we'll talk about that as we come to the end of this session. What one action can you do to move your life forward even today? Or we can do it within a while, within 1 week. Because we seem to be living in a generation where we keep adding knowledge. We're adding knowledge, and it's wonderful. But the thing that will trump knowledge every time is actually action. When your shoulds, I should, becomes a must. I must do that. I must get up and go for a run. Oh, I really don't feel like it. That's okay. It doesn't matter what you feel like. You must, right? And I'm going to ask you as we wind down, what's that one thing that you can take on? And very often, I like it to be so small that people smile at me like, then I can do that. I can march for 5 minutes in front of the TV or whatever it is you're going to choose, that it can be so small that it can be sustainable.
So for me, I think I need to, I know where I want to go. I know what I want to achieve. I think what I really need to focus on is just having the faith and confidence that I have the skills and the talents and whatever it takes to achieve those. Probably what I need to stop doing is being, that I think I could do that would be, it seems simple. I think it'll be harder to actually execute, is just to start ignoring that critical voice a little bit and just let the situation unfold. So for instance, a conversation such as this, know what I want to, know that, what my goal for it is, and then just get out of the way and let things happen, and then reassess at the end rather than during the process. Because I think if I kind of like a lessons learned, in the corporate world where you have a project and you do take all these steps and then you finally complete it, and then you take a step back and say, okay, what could we have done better? What did we do well? I think that's, for me, that's what I need to start doing instead of trying to control the situation, whatever it may be, in real time. Just know that I have. Go ahead.
No, I think I would offer, rather than to ignore it, is to acknowledge it. Oh, okay. I'm feeling rather critical now. Notice it. Let it be there.
Yeah, let it hang out a little bit.
You. But it seems like you're doing a good job right now. So, okay, I hear you.
Right.
And then let it have its space so that it can go, it can melt. Rather than trying to ignore it, because when we ignore things, they just grow bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right. Yeah.
They don't disappear. So I think that would be great homework for you this week, is to just notice, oh, there's my critical voice again. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice gives confidence, makes confident. You don't get hired for a job because you have confidence in knowing how to do it. You get hired when you can show that you can learn the skills that are required. And that will give you confidence. You don't go into a new job with the confidence, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
You practice it, and it gives you confidence.
Okay. Yeah, I think I can do that. I think that's decent.
How are you feeling now?
I feel pretty good. I've felt pretty good all week. Nothing's really, even what we talked about today is not, it's not pulling me down. It's not changing my spirit or my mood. It's just something that I'm aware of that I need to work on. But I feel good. I feel very open to both receive and give. So, I feel like I'm in a pretty good place right now as far as being able to think rationally and logically and not, not let something take me down to a place that I don't want to be. So yeah.
Do you feel kind of complete for today?
Yeah, I feel good. I feel like I've got a sense of direction for the week and something to really watch, engage, and interact with. That being that critical voice inside the head. I'm kind of anxious to see what conversations may may occur inside the old head here. So,
Beautiful.
yeah,
That curiosity is beautiful.
yeah. So, but yeah, I feel great.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.